Titans, the community, they tried to mock us. They said Strand Titan, stupid, another melee subclass, dumb, Titan dumb. And where are they now? Looking up at us Titans on the Strand mountaintop because they were wrong. So wrong. Today, I'm going to show you multiple Strand builds for Titan, and you're going to like it because it's really fun. If you're watching this outside of Season 20, I think both builds posted in this video are going to hold up, but time will tell. And also, everything that I'll be saying here is simply laying the groundwork for your version of these builds. I mention it a million times during the video, but if you need to tweak something, if you play a different way than I do, or you want to play it a certain way, make changes. These builds aren't 100% locked in, you can't change anything. Make it yours. Drop a comment if you prefer something else or you want to suggest something else. I'm sure I will end up learning something new as time goes on. Heart of Inmost Light. You thought I was dead. It is not dead. In fact, on this build, it is quite potent, thanks to multiple melee charges giving us more procs of empowered abilities. The only other Strand exotic Titans have is Abeyant Leap, which is the Barricade Suspend exotic, which is good, and we can build around it. In fact, we do in the second half of the video. But I want to get people excited about melee attacking and grappling into enemies and AoEing them down and all that kind of stuff. The goal of this first build is to weaken the enemy and strengthen your team as much as possible through the use of Woven Mail and Sever. Woven Mail has proven itself to be an extreme amount of damage resistance, allowing you to survive things that you normally shouldn't stand a chance against. The best example that I have is the explosion of a Supplicant Harpy in Spire of the Watcher. Normally, this explosion either kills you outright or gets you really close to death. With Woven Mail on, they don't even break half of your shield. And you're going to be refreshing this buff very often and giving it to your teammates. Not only that, but Quicksilver Storm is going to provide great firepower and Strand weapon synergy. The aspects we're going to be using are the two that we have. We have no other recourse for this whatsoever. If you're watching this in the future and we have new aspects, feel free to mess around with them, but I would say that Into the Fray is probably going to be a staple for this build, whereas Drengr's Lash can probably be rotated out if something really cool comes along that fits better with this setup. Into the Fray gives us Woven Mail when we destroy a Tangle or cast our super, and while we have Woven Mail, we get increased melee energy regeneration, further increasing our Sever capabilities on targets. Fragment-wise, I have gone with Thread of Generation and Fury at a minimum. While it seems weird to be using Grapple for this kind of build, the melee you get after a grapple does some really crazy AoE damage. Dealing damage gets us free grenade energy. That sounds pretty good to me. Thread of Fury also sounds good to me. Damaging targets with a Tangle gives us melee energy. You throw it at a big pile of enemies, you get a bunch of energy. I will say that you may have times where you just use a Tangle to throw at the floor in front of you in order to get Woven Mail. That's totally fine. Not every Tangle needs to kill 17 enemies. But if you can do both, do both. The other fragments I think are a bit open-ended depending on your playstyle. Thread of Warding, picking up an Orb of Power, gives us Woven Mail. This is a little bit of a backup in case for whatever reason we're not able to get Woven Mail through traditional means. Orbs of Power are going to be everywhere, so this is going to be very easy to proc. Transmutation is where weapon final blows make a Tangle if we have Woven Mail, which again we should have quite often. There is going to be a decent amount of overlap with Tangles and how often you're able to make them versus needing to shoot them to proc certain things or destroy them. There's a 15-second lockout from making Tangles, and there's not a whole lot you can do about this. If you find yourself making Tangles basically on cooldown by other means, then this can be rotated out as well for something like Propagation, where powered melee kills give your Strand weapons unraveling rounds. However, in Season 20 specifically, we get the ability to proc unraveling rounds for ourselves via allied unraveling. Rapid final blows proc unraveling rounds, and unraveling rounds cause us to make a Tangle when we kill an enemy. But then if we kill them with a melee attack with propagation on, we also get a tangle and also unraveling rounds, but then we're on cooldown to create a tangle for 15 seconds, but unraveling rounds is 10 seconds, so we wouldn't be able to make a tangle with the unraveling rounds. You see the problem? Unraveling rounds do more than just create a tangle, though. They do some Outbreak, Perfected, Siva, Nanite type stuff, which is still good. But when the Season 20 mods rotate out, then propagation, I think, is going to get a bit more value here. If you tend to skew more weapon damage heavy, then first of all, I would wait until the second half of the video, but I could also maybe suggest Thread of Rebirth, chance to create a Threadling on Strand Weapon Kill. I'm not the hugest fan of this personally, as I feel like if you're going into Threadlings, you really got to go all into Threadlings, but I haven't experimented too much with them yet. Thread of Isolation is also another weapon-focused fragment to sever targets with rapid precision hits with any weapon, doesn't need to be Strand. This felt more like a boss fragment, something where it's not exactly the safest thing to go in for a melee to sever a boss. Legend campaign level stuff, you know, minus 15, minus 20, maybe even GM stuff. I ended up going with Transmutation and Warding, but like I said earlier, there's a lot of overlap, and I think most options are going to work, just kind of depends on the playstyle. It's very possible that I have already swapped to a different fragment after this video comes out, and if I have, I will update the description. Seasonal artifact perks are very easy choices to make here. Multi-Siphon mod didn't end up in my build, even though it makes a lot of sense given the other weapons and perks I'm picking. Could I rotate out one mod for this dual Siphon mod? Sure. Did I do it? No. Could you do it? Yes. I think the net gain of super energy is probably going to be about the same. I also went with authorized Strand to reduce mod costs, and then grabbed Untangler, Volatile Flow, Bricks from Beyond, Allied Unraveling, Threaded Blast, and Prismatic Transfer, although you can grab Medieval Champion if you are using Medieval Champion weapons. I scooped the Void stuff because the Solar mods didn't make sense to pick at all. That's the only reason I went with the Void stuff. If you don't plan on using Void weapons, then you can do something else, but the main thing you want are the Strand perks. Bungie is making that very apparent. The Strand perks seem to be pretty gun-focused and tangle-focused. Destroying a tangle via Strand weapon makes a big boom and suspends target's hit and can give you unraveling rounds. They're all very, very good perks, and you are flush with options in the middle of combat. Stats. For the first time ever, I am going heavy into strength. 100 strength, at least if I'm using a certain fragment, otherwise it's going to drop to 90 and I need to completely redo my build. I want this cooldown to be as brief as possible. I've also opted for some medium discipline and resilience and went heavier into recovery. Recovery, to me, is more important because you have almost no healing, but your health bar, due to Woven Mail, is effectively gigantic, so being able to dip out, regenerate quick, and then get back in is great. I didn't go too high on resilience because Woven Mail is going to do most of the work here in terms of damage resistance, and if I don't have Woven Mail, I'm not going to be playing too aggressively until I have it again. If you need help setting up your armor for the most optimized stat distribution you can possibly get, I highly suggest d2armorpicker.com. It allows you to pick exactly how much of a stat you're looking for and the best ways to get the most out of your armor. Tons of customization options are available on the site. If y'all would like a tutorial on D2 Armor Picker and how to use it, how to optimize it, please let me know. I would be happy to get that video made. This brings us to our mod setup. I want ability energy. I want as much as possible. I want my abilities to give me energy to other abilities when I use them. So I went pretty light on armor charge because I'm going to be doing enough stuff already that I don't want to also have to monitor armor charge. And again, this is always up for interpretation. If you are not doing the things that I am doing, if you're doing something that I'm not, change the mods, make it yours. Helm. Harmonic Siphon for the cheap orbs on kills, and I went with double hands-on for super energy. If you want to run with the Void Strand dual Siphon, take out a hands-on and maybe throw in Radiant Light or Powerful Friends. Just pick one, whichever one you think is going to be better for you. It's not rocket surgery. Gloves, I went with heavy-handed for orbs on melee kills, impact induction for more energy and Heart of Inmost Light synergy, and focusing strike, although I will say that I was absolutely terrible about using my class ability as often as I should be using it. I need to get better at that. Chest is pretty boring, charged up, a resist mod, and I went with an unflinching mod and a stat mod. Do I think you could flex Charged Up out for something else? Absolutely. I might flex this out too for Font of Endurance to go overkill on defense. I tend to only rely on myself when it comes to getting orbs, and I want a more consistent experience versus relying on teammates to pop supers or have really good builds or all that kind of stuff. Boots. Double strand weapon damage bonus and recuperation for a little bit of healing on orb pickup. Melee kills are going to make an orb from heavy-handed, and you'll more or less instantly pick up the orb. A little bit of a heal for you since we don't really have that much else. Finally, class item, stat mod, and some form of outreach, distribution, time dilation. I skew more ability heavy. I want the energy. If you don't go ability heavy, then time dilation could be good for more strand weapon damage bonus uptime. I was initially very worried that this build was a pub stomper build only. It's only going to be good in like the ops playlist or the seasonal activity, +0 or -5 level difficulty stuff. So I went into the Legend campaign, which is -15, and it is great there as well, much to my relief. You can play hyper aggressive, and as long as you're monitoring your buffs for Woven Mail, at least as much as you can right now, you really need to be eating a lot of damage to die, like an irresponsible amount of damage. I will say that it is very easy to forget that you don't have Woven Mail and accidentally yeet yourself into combat and die instantly. You're not unkillable, and you pretty much rely on Woven Mail for a lot of your combat power. But when you do have Woven Mail, you can get pretty reckless. The main holdup in this build is the fact that it's not that good at 1v1 like boss situations, again, kind of Legend campaign focused. It's not like Arc where you can just spam storm grenades and they do all the work for you. You have your 3 melees, a grapple, and a wall. Good for ads, not so great for single target. This is where Quicksilver Storm shines a bit more with a grenade launcher, but you're probably also going to be using your power weapon anyway. Make no mistake, this is an ad clear build first and foremost. I know I keep mentioning Quicksilver Storm, but if you want to switch to a strand gun that you've been enjoying using, nothing wrong with that at all. I just have not had a chance to explore those guns just yet. But in stuff like the Season 20 activity, which is really fun by the way, it wrecks face. Ability energy all over the place. Huge AoE melees from grapple. You're suspending enemies with barricades. You're giving your team Woven Mail with the tangles. It's high action. It's high APM. And it's very, very aggressive. This is not something I'm recommending to people if you plan on being passive or you want to use your guns more. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're not planning on being aggro, then we just need to shift some stuff around. It's no big deal. We'll talk about that shortly. Heart of Inmost Light might honestly be overkill for this, given that you can get a lot of ability energy if you focus up and really abuse your fragments. If there was ever a time for Bungie to at least acknowledge the on-screen buff situation, it would be right now. You have so many buffs going on at the same time, especially with Heart of Inmost Light, and it is basically impossible to tell what you have rolling, and I would love the ability to see more of my buffs. But now, let's get to another build. The build that is considered the build. The Infinite Suspend build. We're swapping off of Heart of Inmost Light and we're going to Abeyant Leap, where your barricade cranks up the dial to 11 on your Lash aspect, more suspend waves going out, and they track much more aggressively. You are going to be a suspension god. You are going to open up the most popular BDSM business in the world with all of the suspend you're going to be doing. Aspects. We kind of know the drill for now, but obviously if you're watching in the future, you got to keep Lash on for this one. The build pretty much hinges on it existing. Fragments. Thread of Mind. Killing stuff that is suspended gives you class ability energy. This is the easiest call we can possibly make. I don't even need to explain why this is good. Put it on. Woven Mail fortunately comes directly from Abeyant Leap. Gain Woven Mail when suspending targets. You are going to be doing this literally all the time, so I don't think you really need to go the extra mile getting more sources of Woven Mail, but you can if you want. You're going to have your class ability, you're going to have your grenade, and in Season 20, you're going to have the artifact perks as a form of suspending targets. Now we get a bit more open-ended. If you really want to push the whole suspend situation, which you probably do, then Thread of Continuity is for you. Increased duration on strand debuffs, very strong pick. If you do go with Thread of Continuity, which again I think you should, it's not the worst time to pick other fragments that enable you to debuff targets to make the most of continuity, like Thread of Isolation, applying Sever bursts with rapid precision hits, enabling severing of targets from afar, although most targets are gonna die well before the sever even matters. You're also gonna have Season 20's Allied Unraveling, so you can get Unraveling rounds, but outside of Season 20, the only way to get Unraveling rounds is from Propagation, which requires a powered melee kill. I was doing a fair amount of melee killing in stuff like the Seasonal Activity and the Legend campaign for what that's worth. Transmutation also works here. Weapon Final Blows make a tangle when you have Woven Mail, but with how much suspending you end up doing, I don't know how much this is needed since you make tangles already with kills on enemies affected by a Strand debuff. That leaves Fury, and you're certainly going to be doing a lot of tangle damage with Season 20's artifact perks, but even outside of Season 20, this is going to be a viable option, assuming you actually use your melee, which you should be. I do think that Generation is a bit too strong to give up in general though, but it depends on how often you're able to use your class ability to suspend. The more you can use your class ability, the more adept you are at getting it back, the less you're going to need to rely on your grenade. My build going into this video is Mind, Continuity, Generation, and Fury. I will melee stuff to sever it, that's totally fine with me. Outside of Season 20, we'll see how much I miss Unraveling rounds, and I will rotate in Propagation if I feel like I need to, or I want to. You're pretty much taking the same artifact perks as before, just be sure to grab all of the Strand ones. Your tangles are going to be coming from killing suspended enemies and unraveling rounds from the artifact, and your objective is to shoot all of the tangles when they are near enemies. That is all you are doing. If tangle, then shoot tangle to make big boom, and then you suspend all targets hit by the tangle explosion. If no tangle, then shoot enemies until they turn into a tangle, and then repeat step 1. And you spam your wall to suspend targets if there is no tangle so that you can make a tangle, and then you shoot the tangle. Stats. You can probably ditch all that strength that we got for the first build. We're using guns here, so all reliable. Resilience, recovery, and discipline gonna be just fine. Try to go as heavy into resilience and recovery on your gear as possible, since those stat mods are more expensive than something like a discipline mod or a strength mod. Your grenade is going to be Shackle Grenade, unless you really want to use Grapple, then, sure, why not? You don't need to go full beans on Resilience, though, thanks to Woven Mail being up pretty constantly. And mod-wise, you want anything gun or class ability related, so we're going to go into Armor Charge a little bit here. I essentially want that permanent uptime on Strand Weapon Surge, so I'm vibing 2x Surge and stacks on stacks, a Time Dilation, along with probably just one charged up mod. 2 Orbs of Power is going to give us, like over a minute straight of 17% boosted Strand weapon damage. If you think that's overkill for you in any sense of this paragraph, feel free to make some tweaks. You could also opt for Utility Kickstart instead of Strand Weapon Surge. Using Rally Barricade, it takes about 3, it's probably more like 4 kills on suspended targets to completely restore your class ability through Thread of Mind. I think Utility Kickstart gets a bit more value the higher the difficulty of the content, because killing targets is gonna be a bit harder than in something like seasonal content, and I did not think Utility Kickstart was needed for seasonal content or even the Legend campaign. This is a flex option if you are struggling to get your class ability often enough. Then we're just going to fill in the gaps with some stuff that keeps our uptime high. Helm, we got Siphon mods to kind of sustain our orb needs. Then, maybe a heavy ammo finder, something a little more neutral. Arms, a lot of the stuff in arms is ability energy focused. You could put in a reload speed mod or 2 if you want. You can keep it simple, or you can spec for ability mods. I think I went a little more ability heavy. Chest, we're going with charged up and some sort of resistance mod, or maybe an unflinching if you think you need it or you just have the extra space. Legs, we're kind of full up already, and class item, we're basically full from time dilation and a big stat mod if you went for a stat mod. I didn't mention this per slot, but if you have the space for a stat mod, use it. But if not, it's much more acceptable nowadays to go without a stat mod in your gear, given the new system and how strong some options can be. I haven't really mentioned much in the way of weapons, since I think builds should stand on their own, but Quicksilver Storm I think is a fantastic gun, along with any sort of really solid energy weapon. Waveframe GLs are still quite popular, but I do need to give a shout out to Circular Logic and Golden Tricorn. Golden Tricorn goes to ×2 if you shoot a Tangle and it gets a kill, which is gonna happen a lot, giving you really high uptime on Golden Tricorn, and it turns this already good gun into something just ridiculous. Try to initiate combat with your class ability as opposed to your grenade, because your grenade can help you get your class ability back with all of the suspension that it does. This build is nice because it's a little one-dimensional. If enemies are not suspended, suspend them if possible. Shoot tangles near enemies. That is your #1 priority in Season 20, as the explosion radius is absolutely ridiculous, and it's an AoE suspend on top of all the damage. Like, if they survive the damage, they're gonna be crowd controlled. Outside of seasons where we don't have these mods, this build's not gonna be as crazy, but it still definitely has enough going for it that it should be pretty self-sufficient. I had a ton of success with this build in the seasonal activity and the legend campaign, which is -15 by the way. I suspect this build will be taken a bit more going into Master and Grandmaster content, as it is a bit safer to use overall, with the added benefit of extra crowd control. I don't really have that much more to say on the build. It's a really solid mix of gunplay and ability usage. It's not as spammy as something like the first build, which is just go, go, go all the time. This build's main weakness is that if you don't have an ability ready, then you're just some guy until you can get that chain rolling again. But that shouldn't be an issue terribly often. 1v1 situation is kind of the same. It's not the best since you can't really crowd control most bosses. This is an ad killing and crowd controlling build. I know I've said it so many times this video. I know. Tweak things if something is not meeting your needs. Don't take what I'm saying here as the end all be all. If you don't want to go armor charge heavy, if you want to go even more armor charge heavy, if you think charge up's too much, stacks on stacks too much, not needed for you, you don't want this buff, you don't want that buff, switch it up. Check out the Build Crafting 101 video I made to get up to speed if you need to. Titans, we got a real good deal with Strand. Enjoy it in Season 20. If you're watching this outside of Season 20 or during a time where we don't have the mods to boost us, I think both builds are going to hold up, but obviously those artifact perks are quite strong. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.